Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to another Wednesday live chat. If you are new to this channel and you're like, who is this lady? What is she talking about? And why does her background look so epic? My name is Bridget Spackman. I am a multi-age teacher in Central Pennsylvania. So I teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade kiddos across all content areas. So I do it all. And I have a huge passion for literacy, and I have a passion for productivity and for personalizing the education for our learners. So I come on Wednesdays just to chat with you guys, to hang out, to kind of hear what you guys are going through in the classroom, see how I can give some of my advice, but also for me to learn from all of you. So, all right, hello. Oh, you're so sweet. You said I look beautiful. I feel like I haven't washed my hair. It's fine. But thank you. You are so very kind. Hello, everyone. I am very, very excited to be here. Quite a group that we got going on today. I feel like there's a lot of you on. So hello and welcome. For those of you that are new, give me a number 1 or just the first time. Let me know if this is your first time kind of here on this live chat joining me. For those of you that are always on here every single Wednesday, I so appreciate you always giving up your Wednesday nights for me. I'm sure that you have really other great happening things that you could be doing. And I just appreciate the fact that you want to spend a little bit of that time with me on YouTube. So thank you so much. Okay, so I'm gonna start to jump right on in. Just like I said last week, guys, I'm gonna try to do my best with going back and forth with answering questions, but also making sure that I'm delivering the content that I want to deliver to you. So feel free to ask questions as we're going on. The focus is really going to be on small groups and how I go about planning my groups in general for reading instruction. So, man, there's quite a few of you that are like first time. So welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. I think this is a really, really good one to be jumping in on because I think it's always a topic that teachers tend to struggle really hard with. I struggled for a really, really long time, guys. Like, I struggled for so long to figure out what was the best, recipe for really making sure that my small group reading instruction was where it needed to be, that I was hitting all of the points that I needed to hit, to making sure that my kids were getting the instruction that they deserved. So, yeah. Lots of people. Hello and welcome. Hey, Leslie, so glad that you were able to make it. I am excited. Okay, so let's talk really fast. And I already had a question, so I'm going to jump in and I'm going to answer it. 3rd grade thought. So you said, how do you manage all of the students' progress if you're personalizing so much? So how do you have time to plan for so many different things? So I want you to think about it from this mindset, okay? So I teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. If you hear little squeaks, it's because Walter the pup is just down here on the floor and he found a chew. So hopefully we can try to snatch that from him if it gets too loud. But here's what I end up doing. With teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, it's really a beautiful progression. Like if you guys ever, and this is probably a really nerdy thing for me to admit, but if you ever just sit and you look at all of the standards and you like lie them out on the floor and you're just kind of seeing the progression that's happening there and how they were written, you'll notice that it just builds upon one another. So it's really just understanding where your standards are, understanding your progression, and then kind of figuring out all of the other bits and pieces in between there. So I was really excited because I was talking with someone about a week ago and we were talking about progressions in general. And I said, listen, our content, what we have to teach every single year, that doesn't change. We have to teach the same content unless they decide to like revamp everything, which it hasn't happened yet. But they have the exact same progression every single year. Our progressions don't change, guys. What changes is how we deliver that content, how we deliver that information to our students, because it varies based upon every student's needs. So I know that what I'm going to be teaching them is going to be the same no matter what. It's how I decide to deliver that information and how I decide to deliver the content that really matters. What book choices I use, what graphic organizers, how much scaffolding am I providing, how much support am I providing. That's the piece that ends up changing. But what you teach, that doesn't really change. So I feel like I have to kind of put in a little bit of a disclaimer really fast that when I'm kind of sharing a little bit about my small group instruction, guys, there's a lot of different methods out there for small groups. And one of the big things that I kind of see out there, especially when you're looking at upper elementary, is that you see this talk of guided reading and then skill-based instruction. So what I'm going to share with you today is more focused on skill-based instruction. So what that means is that for my kids, fluency isn't a huge factor. They're fluent. They're reading on or above grade level, and that's not going to be a really huge factor for me. Now, there are some kiddos where I say, oh, we still got to practice expression. We've got to practice phrasing. But I pull that as a completely separate group, which looks a little bit more like a guided reading instruction. So what I'm going to be giving you, what I'm going to be talking about today, is a little more based off of skill-based instruction. I hope this makes sense. Third grade thoughts, yes, I still have to do guided reading because I have a group that is reading on, this group it's a little bit of a mix. So I have one kiddo in that group that's on a first grade level, a second grade level, and then a third grade level on their reading. So they still need to have guided reading instruction. And to me, guided reading instruction is that I'm still teaching them the foundations of being able to read fluently and also comprehend their text. To me, that is guided reading. But what I'm doing is more skill-based. So with my other groups that I'm going to be sharing with you today is more about skill-based. I can share my guided reading, but that is going to have to be a whole other day because y'all, we would spend so much time here talking about both types of instruction. I hope that makes sense. Lou said, how do you manage stress and being overwhelmed with grading and lesson planning? I think there are so many different strategies out there, and I would totally be happy to talk about how I end up handling some of those situations, because I'm going to be honest, I get stressed like any other person. I think one of the big things that we all need to remember is that it's somehow, some way, under like some magical rainbow ends up getting done. We don't know how, but I have learned my lesson over the years that no matter how stressed I am, no matter how much stuff I have to get done, it all ends up magically getting done. I don't know how I do it. It ends up just getting done. But I do have strategies to help kind of combat that, and also to make sure that I'm not bringing home as much work, and I'm trying to leave some of that at the school so that when I'm home with my family, which I feel like the husband can probably chime in on that. He might say that, no, I'm doing horrible with that this year. But I feel like I've done a much, much better job with coming home a lot earlier than what I've typically done in the past years. Okay, so I'm going to start putting in and talking a little bit about my reading instruction. So, thanks, husband. I'm okay. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be really focused around skill-based, all right? So keep that in mind as we're going through. We could talk about guided reading another night. So here we go, guys. So I have very simple steps. I am a simple person. I like things to be simple. I don't like to have this over complex idea of how I go about and do my planning processes, how I go about and organize my small group instruction. I like things to be simple. And more importantly, when it comes to small group instruction, I also want to make sure that it's short, sweet, simple, and to the point. Okay? I don't want to drag it out. I aim for about 15 minutes of instruction time with my students. And then I want to send them off and I want them to go out and work. So 20% of that kind of that reading ELA block is spent with me. The 80% is them together or independently really digesting and practicing those skills that I have been teaching with them. So here we go, guys. So the first thing I do is I'm going to kind of give you some things that I want you to be thinking about before we jump into that reading instruction. The first thing is to understand your path. You need to know, where is it that I want my kids to end? What is the end goal here? What is that big picture that I need my students to be able to have? Because what I have found over the years, guys, is that when I don't have a clear picture of that path, I tend to get off of track. It's kind of like a road trip, truly. Like, if you don't know exactly how to get from point A to point B, you're going to end up taking all these little windy little turns. You're going to start kind of detouring. You're going to stop at random places, and it's going to take you twice as long to be able to get to where you need to get. So you need to have that very clear picture in mind. And so I really look at where my kids are coming in at from third grade, like what were the expectations for them to end for the end of the year, and where do I need to be taking them to be able to be prepared for the next grade. So I have to look at both of those, and that helps me get a really clear picture of what it is that I need to do. But what I also mean when it comes to understanding and having that path is that I know that if I'm teaching, let's say, characters, I need to review, what are characters? All right, can we identify characters? From characters, do we know what a major and a minor character is? Do we know how to identify the extrinsic characteristics and start inferring based on those characteristics more about my character and their theories? From there, am I able to identify the differences between character traits and character feelings? There's a very, very clear progression on what they need to be doing first to truly understand where they're going to be. So have that clear understanding of your path. The next one is to choose your focus. And this is huge, guys. It's so important that we really make sure that we have one small focus. I feel like sometimes we want to go in and we want to do this grand show and have all of these different pieces that we're wanting to hit, but we don't need to do that. We need to focus on one small thing. We need to make it attainable. We need to have those very small goals for our students so that they can feel successful at the end of the day. When we feed them too much information, their brain starts to go into overload. How many of you have ever gone to a professional development, like your principal sent you to a PD, you've stayed in that PD for 8 hours, and you have had information after information thrown in your face? You leave exhausted, mentally exhausted, because you're like, oh my gosh, that was so much. My brain hurts just from all of that information. That's exactly what happens to our kids. So we need to make sure that our focus is small so that we can help them better understand what they're working on. But it also really helps you to be able to understand what you're going to be teaching. So it not only keeps them focused, but it keeps you focused as well. And that's really, really important. So the next one is plan for scaffolding. Now, I love scaffolding through and through. I think it is a fantastic strategy. And I felt like when I would let go of that scaffolding piece, that I would really see a difference in my kids. So really make sure that you're planning for that scaffolding piece. Think about the bigger picture and then figure out, how am I really going to help my students be able to get to that level of understanding that I need them to be at. So if you guys watched either the live video of some different activities, I had like 5 or 6 different activities that I shared that I use in my reading instruction. If you've seen that video, and I also kind of did a redo of it, and I posted it on the channel this last Sunday. That has different activities that I will utilize to really make sure that when I model it for my kids, all right, so I model it, I then want to give them the opportunity to practice with someone, but in a scaffolded way. I can't expect students that all of a sudden I've modeled it, now I want them to go and just pull it out of the text. Y'all, that's hard. It is so hard. And we have to make sure that we're properly scaffolding. So giving them something to be able to sort, giving them something to be able to categorize, something to that extent, or place into certain parts of a plot map, that really, really helps them get their brains thinking a little bit more about it before you set them free into a text and expect them to apply it all. Good? Is everybody with me? Okay, here we go. The next one is to choose your text wisely. Guys, I cannot say this enough, that short one-page passages or paragraph passages is not enough. There is no rigor in those passages, and we cannot allow ourselves to just give our students those passages to practice out of. As easy as it might be to go to Teachers Pay Teachers and pull up some sort of a passage because it goes along with character traits and you want to teach it, and it's just that thing where you don't have to stress and worry about it, we're doing our students an injustice. And I'm going to be that person to raise my hand up and say, yep, I did it. I was that person at one point, and it was through the stress and through the trying to get to the everyday that I kind of threw myself into that. But it is so important that we really take the time to find the right text, and not only find really good picture books, but find chapter books, poetry, anthologies, short stories, those passages, if you want to find some of those passages, but you have to have you have to have a variety of text with the appropriate lexiles that will really help your kids really dig deep into the stories. It is so, so important. And I will tell you, this is the hardest part of all of it. The finding the books that fit whatever skill that you're going to teach, that is the hardest part of everything that I do in my reading instruction. I will spend a good 2 or 3 days looking for the right texts in order to put it into groups. But once I have my text, y'all, I'm golden. I'm like cruising. It's easy peasy after that point. Why? Because the text does all the work for me. The author who spent time writing that book and the illustrator who spent time, making the illustrations for this text, they're the ones that did all the work. Now I just need to have my students discuss it and pull that information out so that they can put it into their own writing. So this is really, really important. Everybody good? Feeling great? Stay hydrated. I'm going to drink a Diet Coke. I don't know if that hydrates me. That probably doesn't. It probably does the reverse. Okay. So here we go. I was kind of thinking of, how am I going to approach how I plan? Because it's really, really hard for me to, give you a really perfect picture of here's what I do every single day. So instead of kind of giving you like a lesson plan template of what I do every single day, I'm going to talk you through the 5 different types of lessons that I will implement into small group. All right, so there are only 5 of them. So the first one is the engagement. And this is the type of lesson where I'm just reading the story with the kids. I want to make sure that they have the comprehension, that they're asking questions, making those inferences, drawing from the illustrations, really paying attention to the vocabulary in the text, making sure they understand that vocabulary that's happening in the text. And that's just the first type of lesson I do. It's pure, I'm just going to sit, we're going to read this, and we're really just going to talk about it. Because that is a reading lesson. Getting them talking about the text, summarizing what's happening, making sure that they're understanding the events all together, that's a really, really important piece. And here's why I say that this is the most important. Because if a kid does not understand what's happening in a text, if they cannot comprehend it, if they cannot retell you the events that are occurring in that text, how do you expect them to go higher with their thinking skills and then be able to analyze a skill within that text? You can't. They need to understand what's happening in that story first before you ask them to dig really deep into it. So here's kind of some bullets that helps me with my engagement piece. And these are the things that I think through as I'm planning out a lesson that's just on me giving an engagement. It's just me doing some sort of a read aloud, if you want to think about it that way. So first, I need to choose a text. And like I said, I spend a lot of time really looking for the right text. And a lot of the times, I try to choose many texts so that I can use them over and over and over again. And if I have to reteach something, I have another text in my back pocket, not literally, but I have that other text that I can just pull out and be able to use with my students. So I choose a text. Here's the other thing. Read the text before your group. You have to read the book so that you know what are the questions that you're going to be writing or going to be asking as you're going along. So there are 2 different types of sticky notes that I end up using. And so I'm going to kind of jump out of this for just a second. So I have this book, which is Catching Owl Moon. It's a great, great read. I love this story. I will tell you, it's about a little girl. Her name is, I think it's Marcinia. I think I said that properly. I'm not really sure, to be honest. It's about this little girl who loves baseball, and all she wants to do is play baseball, and she wants to grow up to be a baseball player. And mom and dad are like, no, you need to play dolls. Like, it's not right for a girl to play baseball. And then there's this like really hot shot like baseball recruiter who comes and he's checking out the team. And he ends up saying, no, sorry, I don't put girls in my camp. Like, it's a baseball camp that he's recruiting for, and all the kids want to go because he's like the best. And so he says, no, I don't allow girls to come to the camp, but you play good, kid, so keep it up. And so she's like ticked off. And so she ends up getting really down on herself and then ends up going out and showing them and saying, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show them what I can do, and plays her best game. Well, it ends up being that the recruiter she had like some issues with not having the right gear, so she had to get shoes. Well, the recruiter bought her some shoes and said, hey, I expect you wearing these whenever you come to camp. So it's a super sweet story. I love, love, love this book. So when I go through and I look at the book itself and I read it, the first time I read it, guys, I read it just to read it, okay? And this is exactly how I tell it to my kids. I read it to read it. So I practice what I preach. The second time I go through it, then I'm really starting to think about what are those questions that I want to ask my kids. And guys, I really try to focus on having a literal and inferential questions, because I want to see, can you apply this to a variety of texts? Can you ask and answer questions to a variety of texts? So even where there are spots where I'm like, you know what, I really want to see if they can ask something. So maybe I'm going to leave this blank, but I know that I'm going to say, you know, guys, I have a question that I'm thinking here, but I want to see what your thoughts are. What is a question that you think you might ask yourself as a reader here in this page of the book? And so as we would go along and I'm reading through it, I have, go this way, 2 different types of sticky notes. Okay, so I have like this pinky color and then I have like a yellow color. Well, the yellow color are true questions that I'm gonna ask my students, all right? Now, when I start my lesson, I don't have it on the page. I have it on the back. So all I do is I keep them here. And as I go along and I'm asking my questions, I'll take it off and I'll put it just right there on my lap and I'll just stick it. And so there'll be a pile of sticky notes right on my lap. Literally, that's what happens. But I have the yellow ones, which are questions that I'm gonna ask my students as I'm reading. And then I have these pink ones. And the pink ones are things of my thinking. So it's anything that I want to model for my students that I'm thinking about. But y'all, I already have them written down. And again, all I do is I have another little pile of just pink sticky notes. And as I'm going along, I will take it and I say, guys, I was really thinking about something in this book. And in this story, like, she starts to hear mom and dad having a conversation, and it really got me wondering, I think that she's saying that she's going to go and, play baseball and she's going to do her best and show them up because she's angry with them. And a lot of that tells me that from the illustrations. And so instead of me having to sit there and write all of that, which is a lot, they don't need to sit there and see me write that. I have it already written. And so all I do is plop it right on the book. And then I'm done and I move on. So I have all of my sticky notes ready, prepared to go so that I'm not wasting time sitting there and the kids are starting to talk and get distracted and, you got little Johnny messing with something or poking somebody and it just causes behavior issues. So go ahead and have everything written down. Good? Everybody good? All right, let's keep moving. So have those written down and have your teaching points ready to go. Have them on the sticky notes so that you're prepared, and that will make your small group go so much more quickly. So that's the first type of lesson that I have. And a lot of the times I'll send my kids off maybe with a question that I want them to think about further. And I say, hey guys, I really want you to think about this. And in your reading journals, or for me, it's going to be my discussion board in my learner management system, I'm going to say, in our discussion board, I really want you to answer this question about why do you think such and such happened? Send them off to think about the text and then to do some writing. And that really continues that lesson out into independent time so that they're working and continuing that piece of it. So that's the first one. I know, I'm sorry guys, I don't know why I use that one. It's like a habit from when you're in college. They call Johnny and Susie. It's like the one or the other. Sorry, Johnny. Nothing against Johnnies out there. Nothing. The second type of small group lesson that I have is the model. Okay, and this is where I am strategically teaching a skill to my students. And this is either a reading skill that I'm teaching or a writing skill that I'm wanting to teach, but it is a true, you're gonna sit there and I'm gonna truly model it for you. Now, when I say model it, I need to determine the skill that I'm gonna be able to teach, right? So I'm focusing, remember, on that really small little bitty skill that I want them to think about. Is it whether or not that you want them to look more closely at what a character is saying or what a character is doing and really be able to develop a theory based off of that? But I'm only using a couple of parts from the book. So this is important. You don't read the book all over again, okay? You don't read it. But what I do is, again, because I do have the ability to be one-to-one, so I'm able to take pictures of the book and have them ready to go so I can highlight and underline. But if you don't have that, and you have a hover cam, y'all, in kindergarten, I would make photocopies of the pages that I really wanted to focus on for teaching. And so I would just put them underneath my hover cam. Does everybody call it a hover cam? I think that's a brand, but it's like your projection. It's your document camera, I think is what a lot of more people tend to call those. But I would put it under my hover cam and I would project it and I would highlight and I would put my little thinking notes, whatever it was that I was focusing on, but I had them ready to go. And so I'm also going to say that I pick out about 2 to 3 parts of this text, okay? Only 2 to 3 parts. I will model with once, maybe twice, and then I will then release them right there in my group and say, now I want you guys to try. So here is your practice. Now write down either on a sticky note, I'm really, really fancy guys, a sticky note, an index card, or this strip of paper. It really just depends on what I have lying around, to be honest. But I will tell them to jot what they're thinking on that piece of it. And then we'll have a discussion about it. But that's it. That's as far as it goes. I modeled it a couple times. I let them do it. And that is it. Now, typically on the days that I model with my kids, I will send them off with a purpose. And a lot of the times it's the kind of the collaborative piece that I really want them thinking about. So I'll send them off with another text to read either with a partner or with their entire small group, but they're really having a discussion, and it's almost like their own personal group, but it's that engagement piece all over again, but for their group. All right. So I did an engagement piece with my book and I modeled with my book. Now I'm sending them off after I've modeled that skill with their own personal book, and they are practicing having that discussion with that engagement. So they're getting ready to apply the skill that I just taught them today, but just not yet, because I really want them to dig into the text and understand it to the best of their abilities. Okay. So I sent them off with that purpose. So that is the second type of lessons that I will have. Okay. The third type is the collaborative piece. Now, this is where I will typically remove myself as the sole, I know all the information, okay? And this is where I really allow for my students to lead the conversation. Y'all, this is where the magic happens, and I love it so much. I love hearing their discussions. I love to hear them banter, because sometimes they do. They go back and forth with their ideas because they all want to be right. But I love to hear them really working it out. And I'm truly there as a facilitator. I'm there just to listen, to make sure everybody's on track, and to give them guiding questions and points to continue the conversation with what they're talking about. So the collaborative piece is really them kind of figuring that skill out. So that book that I sent them away with, all right, I'm going to have them come back, and then I will do some sort of a collaborative game first, all right, because I want to make sure that they understand what they were reading. I don't really know, because I'm usually at that time when they're having their reading together, I'm usually with another small group. So I need to make sure that they understand what's happening in that text. So this is where those activities that I talked to you about, this is where some of those activities will come into play here. This is where just a fun activity just for us to really have a good understanding. Did you get it? Do you understand what's going on? I'll do a quick activity with them, and then I will allow them to really start kind of digging into the skill. Now, they don't finish it with me, okay? So I start kind of giving them guiding questions. They have their graphic organizers out. They're pulling out the information. They're discussing. I'm using all sorts of different learning strategies that kind of, pencils in the middle, no opt-outs. So there are so many different instructional strategies that are out there that are fantastic to use for this type of instruction. So once I do that, I will then send them off to complete that collaborative skill together. So they have to kind of finish it. And I either make it a really small, short group, and if I have time, I'll come back to them at the very end of class and say, let's talk about it. Let's kind of debrief and see what you guys thought about the skills, and let's just have a discussion, and I'll give you my thoughts. And then I might send you back to revise. That's important. We need to have our kids revise. Send them out to revise, and then the next day is going to be like the independent, or I'll bring them back the next day and we'll share of what they thought with their collaborative pieces, and they'll submit their assignments to me so that I can get an idea of what they know together. So that's the collaborative piece of it. Now, if I have to have additional text, this is also where I would pull out additional text. So this one tends to vary just a little bit. And guys, just because I say that these are the type of lessons, like my collaborative lesson might take 1 to 2 days. And that's okay if it takes a little bit longer to get through the entire lesson, because I really want to make sure that I'm digging deep enough for them to understand what it is that we're talking about. Good? Everybody understand?
Did you just answer that part? Are you expecting students to have basic collaborative skills at this point?
So I do expect them to have some collaborative skills at this point. And I really kind of front load that a lot at the very beginning of the year. And we talk a lot about what does it mean to be collaborative. Y'all, I do so many different activities and games that are not based on instruction, so that when we get to the point of instruction and I have them working collaboratively, they already have some of those strategies and skills that they're working on. So I push that like to its end at the very, very beginning of the year. And I make it a point for them to understand, guys, you're going to be working in groups. And you're going to be working with groups of kids that you may not agree with or you may not like very much, but it's the fact of life. And we all have to be able to understand how to agree or disagree respectfully, and how do we voice our own opinions without being rude to one another. So we talk a lot about all of those strategies. So yeah, we do a lot of work when it comes to how do we collaborate with one another. Great question, by the way. Fantastic. Okay. The next one that I have is going to be the grammar. And this one is such an important lesson because I feel like, bless grammar's heart, but they're kind of left off at the very, very end of the train. And sometimes we get to them and sometimes we don't. But I make it a point to every single week to get to a grammar lesson. But here's what I do. That book that I had that engagement lesson with, the book that I ended up having that the model lesson with, I'm going to pull that book back out and I'm going to find a mentor sentence. All right. So I sit there and I analyze like all these different sentences, and I have to think about, okay, what are the skills that I really want my students to know? Like fourth grade right now, they're working on subject, predicate, parts of speech, like just identifying some of those pieces. Whereas like my sixth graders at this point, we're looking at more of like independent, dependent clauses, complex like sentences, and then it gets a little bit more intense for them, whereas fourth grade just isn't there yet. So I have to make sure that when I find this text, I really go through and I look for a sentence that's going to fit where I want them to focus their attention on. And so when I do that, after I find my sentence from here, I'll end up making it really big, okay? So I'll put it on some sort of a poster board. I have gotten into the habit where I just type it into like a Word document or a PowerPoint document. I save it as a PDF and I blow it up really big into like a 4-page poster size. It works perfect for me. And so I make it really big. But here's the thing, and here's the catch, guys. You want to make sure that you are labeling all of the parts that you want them to focus on. Okay, so you are labeling all of those pieces. You already know exactly what you're going to be looking for. You don't want to go to your lesson not knowing, oh wait, what is that again? Because let's be honest, sometimes we end up forgetting as well. You want to make sure that you understand all of the parts of speech that you are going to be hitting in that lesson. And what is going to be the big focus? So what is it that you want your students to be able to take home? Is it the fact that you're introducing dialogue and you really want to hit home on those conventions? So you need to understand that piece going into that lesson. And so when you have that, then I kind of do it in a couple of different ways. For my fourth graders right now, I typically just on like sticky notes, I will write down how like a verb, and if I have like one verb in that sentence, I'll write the verb down in that sentence. But if I have like 3 nouns in that sentence, I'll write a noun on each sticky note. So I'll have 3 sticky notes with the word noun on it. And so I will have them laid out, and then I will have students discuss in their groups of where they think they end up needing to go. And so they'll post it onto the paper. And that's, again, it's a scaffolding technique because I can't expect them to automatically say, oh, well, I can find it over here. Instead, I'm saying, hey, there are 3 nouns. I want you to think about what we've learned about nouns. Now I want you to be able to put them where they go. So they have an understanding of, okay, here's what I'm looking for, instead of just throwing them in and just wishing the best and letting them kind of go with it. So that works really, really well for me. Having them pre-written, knowing all of your parts of speech ahead of time, and really hitting home on that focus. Now, a lot of the times with this grammar lesson as well, I will always have them write their own sentence to duplicate what I've just taught them. So if I really want them looking at a subject and predicate, and we're seeing that there's a lot of adjectives that are going along with the nouns, I'm going to tell them, I want you to do something like this in your own writing. So I want you to find a sentence in your writing that you're looking at right now, and I want you to pull it out. I want you to write the first sentence, like just your normal one that you've already had written down in your writing. And then I want you to revise it to mimic what this author is doing. And when you revise it, I want you to label the parts of speech that you can identify in your own sentence. And then I want you to label your subject and predicate. Again, if that's my focus, your subject and your predicate there, okay? And then I have them submit that. And that's just another way for me to be able to have that lesson, and kids are learning it authentically. They're getting that practice. They're learning from one another. They're having these very rich discussions in class where they're having to justify their answers, which is really, really nice because they have to have that piece, especially when they start to get up in 6th grade. They really need to be able to justify their thinking. And so I get them used to it by verbalizing it first, and then we start to insert that into our writing as we go along throughout the year. Good? Everybody with me? I hope so. You're quiet. You're not saying much. So I'm hoping that you're with me and that you're feeling good about it and you're not like, what in the world is this lady talking about? Okay. The last type of lesson, small group lesson that I will have is a writing lesson. Now, this is exactly what it is. I'm teaching them a writing skill. So I'm modeling some form of a writing. Now, guys, this can be anything from I'm using a graphic organizer to brainstorm my own writing. I'm using that graphic organizer to then take it into my writing, or I'm showing them how to revise something in my writing that I've already done. But that's kind of the whole bit of what my writing lesson is. So again, you need to determine that focus. And guys, writing is huge. You can't be all over the place with writing, okay? If you want to focus on conventions, great. Focus on conventions. That's it. If you want to focus on how to show, not tell, great. Focus, have that already written out, and then talk about how you can look at your sentences and make it a show sentence versus a telling sentence. So you need to have that pointed down, or else that writing lesson is going to turn into an hour. And we don't want to do that to our kids because they start to do this or they're doing this. They move constantly. So make sure you have the focus that you want them to be able to take away. So one of the things that I always ask, is this something that I need to be able to model completely, or is this something that I can already have my writing completely done? And then talk them through certain little bits and pieces of it. So that's a really good question to kind of ask yourself so that you can also bring that time frame down. Because again, 20% of that time should be us having the conversation, but 80%, y'all, that's a lot. 80% of your entire block should be them practicing. So once you have your idea there, then you're really going to focus on that small part. And like I said, it's different little pieces. Am I just focusing on the graphic organizer? Am I just focusing on making sure that they understand how to take what I wrote on that graphic organizer and try to make it into a sentence, or organize it in a way that makes sense in my writing? So I really just focus on one little bit and piece. But here's going to be the really, really big piece. No matter what age or what grade that you teach, you need to give kids the opportunity to verbalize what story it is that they're going to tell. They need to be able to articulate that verbally in order for them to be able to process that into a writing. When we give kids the opportunity to verbalize and talk through their ideas, they have a better chance to go back and sit down and be able to write it out. This is where you get so many kids who say, I'm frustrated, I hate writing, I don't know where to go, because we're not giving them enough time to talk it out. How many of your students, like when they sit there and they try to tell you a story, y'all, it's all over the place. Like they cannot explain anything to you. They don't give you enough detail because we don't allow kids to talk enough. I know that's crazy. You're like, oh my gosh, you want your students to talk? Yeah, I want my kids to talk. I want them to talk about their stories. I want them to talk about their ideas. We can't just have them be quiet all the time because they need those opportunities to be able to share their thinking, to be able to verbalize it and communicate it. 21st century skill, guys. Communicate their thinking in a way that is organized, coherent, all of that. So that is really important. Make sure that you're really giving your kids enough time to talk. I remember when I taught in kindergarten, guys, and I'm not even joking, this would take me forever, I feel like. And the kids got so much better at it once we started practicing. But before I would let them go out and write, they had to tell me what they were going to write about. So I would have them stand up in the little circle, and as they would tell me their story, I would send them off. And then I would listen to another one tell their story really fast, and I would send them off. And so some of the kids, you could tell they didn't have their story, so they had to sit there and they had to wait. And then I would move on to the next. But they got better. As time went along, we started really slow in the beginning, but as time went along, they got so much better. And they were able then to go out and they knew exactly what they were going to write about. There wasn't that, what am I doing again? What am I supposed to be writing about? I don't know what to write about. There was none of that because I already told them and I asked them, what is it that you're writing about? Tell me your story. I want to hear your story. And they love that. I mean, what kid doesn't want to tell you all about what's going on in their life? They love it. So let them talk it out. I feel like I'm preaching. I'm stepping off of my soapbox. Is that what it's called? Yeah, soapbox. I'm stepping off and I'm just going to drop it there. Okay, guys? So that's it. Those are the 5 types of lessons, like small group lessons that I will plan for. Again, 15 minutes. I aim for 15 minutes. Now, there are a lot of times I get to 18, 19, but I never try to go over 20 minutes, ever. I always stick under there. And a great way to kind of take accountability for yourself, and this was one way that really, really helped me. I didn't want to put an alarm on because, y'all, it never failed. I'd have my timer go off, and then I'm going to use Johnny again. Little Johnny would say, the timer's off. That means small group's done. And you got kids moving around. The timer's still blaring off. And you're like, oh my gosh, I just had one more thing that I needed to say. It was ridiculous. And I got tired of the kids telling me that I needed to stop small group and the other kids moving around looking at me. It just became ridiculous. So what I do is on my Apple Watch, I will just put 20 minutes and it'll vibrate. And so they don't know that it's vibrating. I just feel it. And so it keeps me accountable to make sure that I'm on task, but without the other kids knowing. So I feel like I am more on top of it and I look on top of it because the kids are noticing that, oh, she's really on it, but they don't know that I have this magic thing on my wrist that holds me accountable. So, Alexis, you asked, do I present them in a certain order? Yes. So with this bridging literacy method that I have developed over the past year, I do present it in a very strategic method. I will always have it, and I think it was in the right order of this presentation, but I will have the engagement, I will have the model lesson, I will do the collaborative, and if I have to do any reteaching there, I will do reteaching. I will then do my grammar, and then I will do my writing lesson. Okay, so actually I think it's my writing lesson, then my grammar, so I apologize. It is a writing lesson because we look at the author's craft and the kids start brainstorming, and then they will do the grammar, and we always have a reflection piece, which is more of an independent piece at the very end of it. So that's the bridging literacy method that I've talked a lot about. So I hope that helps. Okay. At this point, I'm going to give you a second because I know it's a little bit delayed. What is your greatest takeaway? What are the types? Which of these types do you really see yourself using the most now? What are the things you are already doing? Because pat yourself on the back. I know you're doing really good things. You're probably like, yeah, I do this because you're doing it right. And then what are some of the things that you really want to try more of? So share some of those in the comments. I'm going to take another sip of Diet Coke, kind of rest myself for a minute, but I want to hear from you. What are what's your biggest takeaway from this? Or what questions do you still have? I'm really good at wait time.
Hey, here's a question that was asked early.
Okay.
And I don't think you answered it. How do you manage all of the students' progress if you are personalizing so much?
I think I did answer that one a little bit. Mm-hmm.
How do you manage stress and being overwhelmed with
Got it.
grading and planning?
Man, I'm getting it, guys.
How do you keep small group materials organized? How do you get along with teachers that are different and judge your style?
Okay, I'm going to do how do I keep my small groups organized? So my small group materials, I'm pretty blessed. I'm not going to lie. I am very blessed, very spoiled because we are one-to-one district. So a lot of my small group materials are housed on our learner management system. So that means everything that I have is on this bad boy. It's on my iPad, and I don't have to stress about it because the kids have access to it.
Main screen?
Now, oh yeah, thank you. I can go off of this now. So I have everything on my iPad, and the kids have iPads as well, so they have access to all of that. Now, if I don't have the materials on the iPad, I use something called the 43 folder system, which I will just place all my files in there and I'll just open it up. It's like a file folder system. I did do a video on that, right?
Yep, I'll link it.
So we're going to link that video so that you guys can see it. But I use a 43 folder system. I put it in for that day, and that's really all the materials that I end up using. Now, I do have a couple of other like pointers or any other smaller materials that I use for more of my guided reading group. And I just house that right underneath my little easel that I use. Leslie asked, when are you doing one-on-one conferences? So what will end up happening is I will do my teaching, and this is another reason why I try to stick to about a 15-minute, no more than 15 minutes, like 15 to 20 minutes lesson, because then the remainder of my time is going to be for conferences. So I will get to I have been hitting about 3 to 4 students. If I'm on a really good roll, it's 5 kiddos a day. Now, I also have days where they're built-in reflections. So the days where the kids are really working independently and there's that built-in reflection day, I'm able to get in way more kids than that. So I'm typically up to like 8 to 10 kids on those days. And so that's usually when I try to do the bulk of my conferencing, but I will always do it at the very end of my lessons. So I talked a little bit about in my last video about how I have a little conferencing, what is that called? I have like a conference guide, I think, in my store, but I use my conference guide. So I have these little tickets, and then I kind of have on my calendar inside of my planner, I write down names of what students I'm going to meet with on what days. And as I write them down, I write them a little ticket, and on that ticket, they have to kind of create their own question. So I ask them to come up with a question, make sure they have their materials so that we're ready to discuss as soon as we get in. And that's pretty much how I do it. I can do a whole other video on how I do my conferencing. It would be really, really cool if I could like video a conference that I have with one of my students so that you guys could see it. I might try it, see what happens, may not be able to use it. I don't really know, but we'll see. So I hope that answered your question. There was somebody that said, how do I handle teachers that what?
That you don't get along with or that judge your style.
That I don't get along with.
That was it.
I get along with everybody.
How do you get
No,
along?
I'm just kidding.
How do you get along with
not
teachers
true.
who are different and judge your style?
I kind of shut the door. It's really, really lame of me. I'm a dork. I just kind of shut the door and I do my own thing. Like, I don't really, I don't try to have any of that happen because it's too much negativity into my space and it really throws off my day, and I just don't have time to worry about it. So I really just focus on what's happening in my classroom. I will tell you, I did feel a lot of that when I first started teaching, that I felt like teachers didn't really like the way that I was doing things because I wasn't doing things the traditional way and how everybody else was doing it and teaching it the same way. And it really affected me then, and I got really upset, and I would let everything get to me because I am super sensitive. I'm just a sensitive person. And so I would let it get to me, and it tore at me a lot. And so I finally had to just tell myself, you know what? You do you. You do you, and you worry about you, and you worry about what matters the most. And what matters the most at those times are those kids in my room. That's what I need to worry about. And so it just took a total mindset shift for me. And when I went to the Ron Clark Academy, one of the things that I loved that he said, he's like, keep your coworkers out your mouth. And I was like, oh, yes. I loved it. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there. So I hope that helps. Okay. Cheyenne, you like the sticky notes with your read alouds. It is the best thing ever. And what I've started doing now as well is my graphic organizers, I already have those written out as well. So whatever graphic organizer that I'm using to like share with my students and model my thinking and be able to show them how I would put my thinking onto that graphic organizer, because we need to model that for them, or else you're going to get the question of, what do I write here? We want to stop that. And so to stop that, I model that for them in that modeling lesson. But I will have it already written. And so what I do is then I have sticky notes on them, and I will just tear the sticky note off, and I'll ask students to notice what I wrote and how I wrote things, and get them having a conversation about what they see on my graphic organizer. So saves so much time. Like, they really don't need to sit there and see me saying the character. Like, they don't need to see that. Okay, they don't. Unless you're trying to teach them how to write a complete sentence, but that's a whole different lesson. It's not a modeling how to use a graphic organizer lesson. So I hope that ends up helping. I'm glad that you like the 43 folder system. It's my favorite. I love it. Totally changed my life.
What is a good and easy way to have your students incorporate what they're learning with writing?
So the best way that I'm going to tell you is that bridging literacy method that I've been telling you about. And with bridging literacy, what you're really doing is you're looking at the reading skill that you've been talking about, that you've modeled, that they've been really focusing on, and you're having them take that exact lesson, that exact skill that they've been working so hard analyzing what these amazing authors have been doing, and you're going to have them apply that into their writing. So for instance, right now, what I'm doing with my sixth graders is they're really looking at character change. But more importantly, they already know characters change, right? It's not a beginning and an end. Like, how does the character end? It's not that kind of change. It's more of the, what are the events that are occurring within this text that's causing this character to change? What are the reactions that you're noticing as we're going through this plot? So they're really kind of trying to pull out those events and looking at the characters' reactions based on making inferences or literal pieces that they're finding in the text. So then what they're going to end up doing is that in their own writing, and this is the last thing that they're going to do, it's like their revision piece, the last thing they're going to do before they publish, in their own writing, they're going to pull out their character, which is them, because it's a personal narrative. But they had to identify the change that occurred in their personal narrative. But now I'm going to ask them to identify those events. What are the events? What was that moment that happened that just said, wow, I'm a totally different person now? I want to see the event, and I want to know what your reaction was. So they're going to use that same graphic organizer and then apply that into their own writing and be able to put that into it. And so I think that has been one of the biggest pieces that I think for writing that in the past I feel like I have failed at, is that I just kind of expected them to just write. And it was great when we were in kindergarten and it was a, one-day writing piece. And there really wasn't a ton kind of going into it. But when we're looking at these writing pieces and you're asking me to have a fully developed character with dialogue, with it really going in depth, we can't expect kids to just go out and be able to write it. We need to give them all of the proper tools. And what best proper tool is there than an authentic author that's out there that's already doing it and seeing how they're doing it, learning how they're doing it, and then putting into your own writing. I don't know. To me, it's the best. The absolute best. All right. Hope that helps.
I got here late. I'm not sure if this question is appropriate. How often do you get to publish the kids' writing?
So we will typically publish every 3 weeks. Now, if there are some crazy things that are happening in between there, like right now we're going to have a Cultural Heritage Day party type situation. We had fundraisers that took up a lot of time. When things like that end up happening, it takes us about a month to be able to publish. So they have one piece that they really dig in deep and they're kind of dissecting, but then they also have free writes that they're using and they're writing about. And typically during those conference times, I'll look at their free writes and kind of give them some pointers and say, hey, do you remember when we did this? I want to see you be able to put that into your writing, into your own free write. So we have one piece that we dig deep in. Takes us about 3 weeks, maybe 4. So usually it's about 1 a month is what we are able to kind of get through, which I feel like that's pretty good. For the writing process, it's fantastic. It takes me way longer to write certain things, so I'm impressed with these kiddos. Okay. good questions.
I think that's
I
good.
love those questions. They were great. Oh, it's almost 8:30. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm super thirsty. Okay, so we are getting to the point where we're wrapping up. You guys had great questions today. Thank you so much for coming in with these questions. I love hearing your questions. I love hearing where you are in your thinking and in your own groups and your classrooms and what you're doing, because it also helps me get a better idea of how I can support you, because this is what that time is for. This time is for me to really make sure that I am supporting you with as many things that I possibly can. So when you're asking those questions and you're engaging into these conversations, I think we have a better opportunity of really just helping each other out and making sure that we're doing right by our kids, which is important. How many times have I said that in this? Somebody go back and rewatch it and tell me how many times I said that. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining with me on this Wednesday night. Please make sure that you give the video a thumbs up. Go ahead and do it now, because I know you're going to forget. Please don't forget. It really, really helps to be able to share this video with more teachers. It helps me out to be able to continue doing this, because I do love it, and I want to continue it. So hit the thumbs up button. If you are like, who is this beautiful woman and what is she like talking about? She is so smart. I'm really not. But I appreciate if you do think that. Anyways, if you don't know who I am, again, my name is Bridget Swackman. I am a teacher in Central Pennsylvania. So I teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade learners. I'm a multi-age teacher. I love talking everything literacy, in particular a bridging literacy model, which is a model that I have created over the last year and in putting into practice into my own classroom. I love talking about productivity, and I also love to talk a lot about personalizing the learning experience for our kiddos. So I would love it for you to hit that subscribe button, and do not forget to hit the notification bell so that you know every time I put up a video or when I go live. Super important, because these nights are hot. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching. I love you all so much. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will see you all next time. Bye.